The New York Islanders' official roster to start the 2024-2025 season is in. We'll break it down and talk about how this team is different from last year's team and last chance for Oliver Wahlstrom. Will he take advantage? We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Busy show ahead today, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for instant insight and analysis, and it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. The New York Islanders got some news as of 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. All the players that were placed on waivers, and we went over that list on yesterday's show. Every dayers, you know that. All of them cleared. Nobody claiming Pierre Engvall. No shock that no team wanted to touch that 6 years remaining on his contract situation. A little surprised that Samuel Bolduc cleared waivers, that no other team wanted to take a flyer on Bolduc, but maybe that also indicates how his stock has fallen over the last couple of years. And again, we spoke about it a little bit on yesterday's show. The way the Islanders handled Bolduc, not ideal, but hopefully he goes back down to Bridgeport, gets to play every day, and will also be able to get his confidence back and get his game back so that he can return to the NHL team, whether it's later this year, next season. You know, you spent a second-round pick on Bolduc. You got to hope he's still able to develop into a quality player. But here is the lineup that the Islanders are going with. And yes, by the way, it is a 22-player lineup. 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goalies. So the cap crunch that the Islanders have does cost them having one player, on the NHL roster that the league allows you to have. In this case, it is usually a forward. So the Islanders only have one reserve forward to start the season, one reserve defenseman, and no reserve goalies. Most teams don't. But the forwards, in alphabetical order: Matthew Barzal, Casey Cizikas, Anthony Duclair, Julien Gauthier, Simon Holmstrom, Bo Horvat, Anders Lee, Kyle McLean, Brock Nelson, J.G. Pajot, Kyle Palmieri, Maxim Shabanov, Oliver Wahlstrom. The 7 blue liners: Dennis Cholowski, Noah Dobson, Scott Mayfield, Adam Pelech, Ryan Polak, Mike Riley, Alexander Romanov, and then the goalies, Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov. Now, the big news about the goalies, and we mentioned that Marcus Hogberg went through waivers, is going to start the season in Bridgeport. That means that the Islanders believe that Ilya Sorokin is 100% and ready to start the season. Whether or not, he's going to start Thursday night when the season opens against the Utah Hockey Club, and this will be the first time we're seeing the Utah Hockey Club, that remains to be seen. But as of right now, at the very least, Sorokin is going to be the backup. And if I'm the Islanders, I'm taking my time with Ilya Sorokin. He hasn't even played in a preseason game. Obviously will not, because there are none left. But to me, let him get more practice time. Let him be the backup for at least the first game, maybe the first two. And then we'll see how ready he is. And you may have some growing pains, or not growing pains, but you may have some rust with the timing and with the back. So we'll see how soon he is going to get a start, and then B, going to actually be back to the Ilya Sorokin that we've come to depend on all these years. And make no mistake, while Semyon Varlamov is more than capable of starting most of the games early on in the season, over the long haul, you want Ilya Sorokin to be your number one goalie. And hopefully, let's say by November, you want him to at least be starting half the games. And ideally, you want him starting even more than that. So we'll see how quickly Patrick Waugh moves with Ilya Sorokin. But again, and I've said this before, and I think it is 100% true, I'd rather have Sorokin miss a couple of extra games in October than not to have him at 100% later on in the season, especially post All-Star game and for the stretch drive. So with Patrick Waugh, we know these line combinations change. We know that, it's not going to be the same even period by period, but to open the season, these are the likely line combinations. The top line, which worked so well in preseason, Bo Horvat, Anthony Duclair, Matthew Barzal, that center, left wing, right wing. The second line, Brock Nelson, Maxim Shabanov, Kyle Palmieri. Third line, J.G. Pageau, Anders Lee, Simon Holmstrom. And then the fourth line will be Kyle McLean, Casey Cizikas, Oliver Wahlstrom. Those are the top four lines for this team. And then you have Julien Gauthier as your 13th and only reserve forward. Now, keep in mind, you have a lot of flexibility here because Gauthier is better suited for the wing, I think, than for center. But realistically, because Casey Cizikas and Kyle McLean can play center or wing, Matthew Barzal can play center or wing, you've got enough flexibility here that, if either a center or a wing goes down and you end up putting Gauthier in the lineup, you could easily move any one of those guys to center, and, you got a lot of options. So that's not a problem. Now, on the blue line, you've got Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov as one pair. The old pair of Adam Pelech and Ryan Polak, which we need to see, hopefully them getting back closer to the way they played 2-3 years ago. They stay healthy, they play that way. And then Mike Riley and Scott Mayfield are the third pair, with Dennis Cholowski going to be the seventh defenseman. So the Islanders, as I said, Sorokin ready to go. Whether or not he starts on Thursday, opening night, they haven't ruled that out yet. But I would, again, be cautious if I were Lou Lamoriello and Patrick Waugh. Matt Martin has not signed a contract, but will remain on a PTO. What does that mean? He can practice. He cannot play. He's going to stay with the organization. Maybe he's an unofficial assistant coach. He will practice with the team, but he's not eligible to play. And again, right now, unless another move is made, the Islanders just do not have the cap space to sign Matt Martin. So we have to see how that plays out. And, one other thing we've learned, and I think this is no surprise, Siplikov is going to play on the power play. Probably on the first unit, but we don't know for sure. And I expect that, he'll be on the first unit, and I think Oliver Wahlstrom will get some time on the second unit. So that's the way the lineup looks in theory for the start of the season. But again, Patrick Waugh, if the team is struggling, he's been known to change line combinations mid-period, let alone after a period or, mid-game. He doesn't hesitate to make changes to try to, get a spark going for his team. So we'll see how long these combinations remain together, but that's the way the team is likely to start. Pierre Engvall cleared waivers. He is going to start the season in Bridgeport unless he refuses to report. I don't know why he would do that. He may demand a trade, but who's going to take that contract? If I'm him and I want to get paid, he may not count as much as the full $3 million against the cap, but the Islanders still have to pay him. He's got a 1-year deal. So, if I'm Pierre Engvall, I'm reporting and I'm playing in Bridgeport because I'm going to get my paycheck that way. And while it may not be what he had in mind and it may not be ideal, hey, if it was up to me, I would do a job that was less than ideal for $3 million a year in most instances. And I'm not saying like a terrible job that I'm going to hurt me or I'm talking about a job where I like the job, but not the location, that kind of thing, where it wasn't what I expected. For $3 million, I'll deal with it. I think that's where Engvall spends the rest of the season unless a team steps up and wants to acquire him. And, is it theoretically possible the Islanders retain a little salary in order to make that happen? Maybe. We'll see. But right now, that's the way this team is going to start the season. All right. We have got a lot more to get to. Oliver Wahlstrom making the team, definitely a little bit of a surprise. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a Russian player that the Islanders are indeed reportedly interested in. They seem to be getting a lot of those lately. And plus, we'll talk a little bit about the new fourth line. For our Islanders' birthday of the day, a native of Kyiv, Ukraine, who played parts of 2 seasons with the Islanders in the mid-2000s. Let's see if you can guess who this offensive defenseman is. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, and there's so much to bet on this time of year. Baseball playoffs in full swing, college football, pro football going on right now, and hockey season gets underway. Well, it's already underway, but the first game's in North America tonight. Islander fans, check out the odds for Thursday's game against Utah, or maybe you want to bet whether the Islanders make the playoffs, whether or not Ilya Sorokin wins 30 games this year. Go check out all the odds at FanDuel. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So Oliver Wahlstrom made the team, and I am very happy for Wally. I've always been a Wally fan. I just always wanted to see him do more. And, he's stepping in to the fourth line. And, that is not the role that you envision for Oliver Wahlstrom when you draft him in the first round. Oh, yeah, he'll be that fourth line guy, but it isn't as shocking as maybe we thought it was. Why? Because last year, if you remember, in the offseason, Wally talked about wanting to develop into a power forward and be more physical. And I think that's the role he's going to play now. Patrick Waugh at practice basically saying, I like Wahlstrom's scoring touch. I like the way he played against the Rangers Friday. I like his training camp overall. He's been playing very well defensively. I really hope Casey Cizikas and Kyle McLean rub off on him. I hope they're going to help him bring his game to another level, which is probably what he wants. And, the fact that he can be physical and has size is probably one of the reasons why he's still on this team. And Wally, I think, is taking it in stride. Unfortunately, he's had his ups and downs, a lot of struggles, and he understands that this may really be his last chance to stick in the NHL, at least with the Islanders, and make his mark. And, if you start the season on the fourth line and also get some power play minutes on that second power play unit, if you play well and you start putting pucks in the net and you do what's asked of you physically and defensively, that role can only grow. And one thing that Oliver Wahlstrom has never done in his NHL career is establish himself as an everyday NHL player. He just hasn't been able to do that. And now, he's never played. He only had more than 44 games in a season once. And that was back in 2021, 2022. And he had 13 goals and 24 points in 73 games. Well, guess what? You put a guy like that on the second line or the first line, that's terrible. You get 13 goals from a fourth line winger, that's not so bad. And I think Wally can do better than that. So there is that. And Wahlstrom, again, seems to be taking it all in stride. He told the Hockey News, I think the main goal for me is just to stick to my game. I think no matter what line I'm playing on, I always want to bring it. I want to bring the offensive, the flair back for McLean and Cizikas. McLean is really, really a good skater. He creates things. And then Cizikas goes in hard on forechecks. So for me, it's finding those open areas and continuing to play my offensive style and play fast. You can't get caught up in where you're playing. You've got to stick to your identity. And he admits he can be physical. I think I've always had that physicality. It opens things up for me. My focus is on winning all those battles because I want the puck on my stick. And I know I stay consistent with that. It doesn't matter where I'm playing. I can create chances and produce. Hopefully, that's what we see from Oliver Wahlstrom. And look, let's face this fact. The identity line is going to have a different identity than it did in recent years. McLean adds a little speed. Cizikas can add a little speed. He's not, he's not an elite fast skater, but he's got a nice burst. And Wahlstrom gives them someone who potentially can score more goals on that fourth line. You're looking at a fourth line that may not be as physical as it was with Clutterbuck and Martin, but it certainly can be more speed-oriented, slightly, and it can be more dangerous offensively than it was in recent years. It's still, it may not be the identity line. It may not set the tone for the team quite the same way that it used to. But at the same time, it could set a different kind of a tone and have a different kind of a role than it has in recent years. And, there are some real differences between where this team was a year ago and where this team is now. We're going to talk about those differences. Plus, we'll talk about another Russian player who the Islanders are reportedly interested in, although he won't be coming over until next year. So, relax. It's not happening right away. But we'll talk about all of that, plus our Islanders birthday of the day, coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of Locked On Islanders will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/LockedOn. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOn right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/LockedOn. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So before we get into the line combinations and sort of how this team is a little bit different than it was a year ago, the New York Post reporting that the Islanders are one of 4 teams to ask about the availability of Maxim Shabanov, who is currently playing in the KHL. The Maple Leafs, Predators, and Utah Hockey Club are the other teams who have been interested. He's playing for Traktor Chelyabinsk in the KHL. I know I butchered that pronunciation, but my Russian is not great. Last year, 25 goals and 50 points. This year, 12 games, 14 points so far. Nobody's been there to see him play in person. He's 24 years old. He can play both wing and center. The team, by the way, located just south of Ekaterinburg in central Russia. And here's the thing. Right now, 4 teams are interested. It could go as high as a dozen, like it was for Siplikov. But the fact that the Islanders have a lot of Russians, Romanov, Siplikov, both goalies, obviously, you've got guys on this team who can help recruit this guy and bring him in. He's not very big height-wise, but here is a player who next year could become available. Whether he becomes an Islander, well, we're a long ways away from that, but just put it on the radar that is indeed a possibility. Now, here's the difference, or a few differences, between last year's team and this year's team. And let's not kid ourselves, okay? The roster is very similar. But last year, you had at most 4 top 6 forwards on this team. Now you got 6 with the additions of Anthony Duclair and Maxim Shabanov, and hopefully Shabanov fills that void. You know, he looks good in preseason. He's still got to prove he could do it in the NHL, but you know, if he becomes a legit 20-plus goal scorer in his first year and gives you even an average second line winger, that's a big difference. The third line, I think is more or less the same. And then we talked a little bit about the fourth line and the difference that you're going to see there. And the fact that Julien Gauthier is your extra forward. What does he bring? Speed. So you've got more guys who are quick. Duclair, quick. Barzal, he's got the speed. Palmieri sometimes has a good burst. Holmstrom has speed. McLean has a little burst. Zizekas has a little burst. Look, the Islanders are still not a fast team, but they are faster than they were. There is more depth here, especially in the top 6. And like we said, the fourth line is going to be different. Big concerns, the health, obviously, of Ilya Sorokin, and then obviously depth along the blue line. You know, nothing against Dennis Cholowski, but I don't want him playing 45, 50 games. You got to have Mayfield, Pelech, Polak, stay healthy. Romanov has to be healthy. Dauber, you know, there is not a lot of depth on the blue line right now. Most of the prospects are a couple of years away. I guess Grant Hutton would be also a possibility. Bolduc a possibility. But overall, you've still got, a little hole there. If 2 guys get injured, this team could be dealing with a lot of issues. But we'll see. We'll see. But preseason, this team looked better. They looked a little more disciplined. And now let's see whether or not they are able to take it to the next level. We'll see. But right now, the New York Islanders seem to be finding a little more optimism heading into the season. All right, time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. We're a little early now on this one because the actual birthday isn't until Thursday, but Thursday will be the 52nd birthday of former Islanders defenseman Alexei Zhitnik. Now, Zhitnik, a native, as I said, of Kyiv, Ukraine, drafted by the LA Kings in the 4th round in 1991, made his debut with the Kings in 92-93, then played for Buffalo and joined the Islanders for the 05-06 season and then part of the 06-07 season, then played for Philadelphia and the Atlanta Thrashers before finishing his career back in the KHL after the 2009-2010 season. Zhitnik was good offensively. He could move the puck and do some good things. Played in 1,085 NHL games, 96 goals, 471 points, and 1,268 penalty minutes. Add 9 goals, 39 points in 98 playoff games. And again, Zhitnik, never an all-star, never a Stanley Cup winner, but always a solid contributor for the teams he played for. One of his better games as an Islander, January 28th, 2006, Islanders in Boston to take on the Bruins. Rick DiPietro, the goalie for the Isles. Tim Thomas, the goalie for Boston. And with the score, basically the Islanders trailing 3-2 in the third period. Our Islanders' birthday of the day, Alexei Zhitnik, ties the score at the 8:49 mark. Mike York and Miro Shatan with the assists. And then less than a minute later, in fact, just 20 seconds later, Mark Parrish gets the game winner from Sean Bates. Islanders go on to win 4-3 for Alexei Zhitnik. He scores the goal. He has a +2, had 4 shots on goal, and played 27 and a half minutes. So he really could, eat up a lot of time, and that had value for the Islanders or whatever team he was playing for. Alexei Zhitnik, who is about about to turn 52 later this week. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're back tomorrow. We'll have the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. Hopefully an update on who the starting goalie might be on Thursday. Can't wait for that. And don't forget, on Thursday's show, we will actually preview the first regular season game of the year. So make sure you join us for that. We'll have the line combinations and for the Utah Hockey Club and talk about their strengths and weaknesses, among other things. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.